launch quickly into telling you a little bit about Nominum. Nominum is a software vendor focusing on DNS, DHCP, and enum, and with a global footprint. I'll jump quickly into the discussion of today, and I'll repeat a little bit what Jim touched on, which is really in the world of peering, like we're talking about today at the Voice Peering Forum. The early stages of peering happened basically by going always via the TDM cloud. And as carriers progressed and tried to avoid the PSTN, they built these mesh networks where all soft switches within a network, within a carrier, could talk to each other, or they tried to do it across. And the example of the VPF, the Voice Peering Fabric, is a way to consolidate and to create this notion of a clearinghouse or a common cloud in the network, similar to how Jim would talk about doing it for billing purposes. And this is where it's creating the need for something like a common routing directory, what we call it an IP application routing directory, either external managed by a third party or, managed internally within each network. Now, why do we call it an IP application routing directory when we talk about enum? Why not just an enum server? Enum is the technology. Enum is the protocol. And we're not talking about public enum where everybody is going to really publish their phone number on the internet and make it available for every person with a SIP phone on their desktop to really configure their own SIP proxy and be able to communicate with each other. It's really about application level routing. It's really about encapsulating the intelligence and the routing information at the application layer and really allowing this freedom, like Shirari earlier talked about, Ethernet connectivity between different organizations and being able to peer between each other. Then decisions can be made at the application level over how you can interconnect between each other. So the first start for peering is really how do you manage your data inside your network. And here, as I said, enum is an enabler. The routing directory, the ability to consolidate data, if you want to share that data and publish it into the voice peering fabric, you need to be able to create and aggregate all of the data that's coming from different sources, internally and externally, and manage it yourself, and decouple it from the routing tables that you may have in your switching elements. And in a way, you're able to also manage not only your route prefixes, your least cost routing information, you're able to bring the LERG, LNP, and take it from service bureaus like Telcordia or Newstar and push it inside your network. And then what you're doing then is you're not necessarily making a flash cut between IP and SS7. You're enabling your IP networks to traffic and coexist and perform functions like an out-of-the-box IP translation for number portability and so on, while you're making the migration towards IP. Now, if you look at how you move forward and you start peering with others, now you're talking about being able to leverage service bureaus to really feed information to you, but also you're able to exchange data with other peering partners. So this is not necessarily enforcing with the notion of an enum routing directory. If you're managing it inside a carrier's network, it's supposed to give you the flexibility to really do bilaterals and also work in a multilateral framework. So in a way, we're looking at enum and how enum is being used in the peering world, whether as part of a third-party clearinghouse or inside a carrier network. It is becoming the network control point. And here we're using the term network control point. It's akin to the service control point in SS7. And here it's meant to apply, like the gentleman mentioned earlier, about this does not apply to just voice. It applies to any session. It could be a multimedia application. It could be a presence server, any one of these. And the key criteria to really be successful in this space is really to have some level of protocol independence. If you're having switches or applications trying to dip for number portability or trying to look up routing information, you're not restricted to just voice. You're trying to supply it for content providers. Like we've heard of the GSMA IPX example. In mobile, you have a lot of content providers that are dipping for number portability. They're trying to figure out, who do I build back for this ringtone download? Who do I build back for this music download, etc.? So the idea of protocol independence at the query level is important. The idea of data source agnostic type of repository is important because what's happening is that you're not necessarily just relying on data inside your network when you're peering. Very often you need to talk to your peering partner to see whether they can handle, for instance, the route, if you want to route it to them. Do they offer you a better route for a better rate, for better quality? Or you may be coming to the VPF, you may be going to Telcordia, you may be going to XConnect or RBNet or a variety of these third parties. And on top of this, you're also trying to perform some level of routing logic where you're trying to refine the route. You may have, now with IP and with voice peering, you have a lot more choices than you used to have in the past. And in some situations, not always, but you may have to be dependent on being able to perform some logic to figure out, well, which set of data do I really want to look at for a particular session? So I may not necessarily be able to have the freedom to really just default to one preferred partner. I may need to really perform some logic before sending a call to a particular partner, depending on the situation and the criteria for that call. So this hopefully gives you an example of really how Enum, rather than looking at it from a global peering perspective and how it would be used in a public Enum initiative, how it would be used inside a carrier's network for bilateral peering agreements, or for situations where you may be integrating and using services like the VPF today. And this pretty much concludes all my remarks. The one thing that I would add is that a lot of the use today is being put to use, Enum is being put to use for least cost routing implementation in an IP level and combining it with LNP. And at the same time, this also does not divert anybody from moving forward towards IMS, as Enum and this type of approach, this type of architecture has been defined in the IMS standard, and it is a stepping stone towards achieving full IMS compatibility. Thank you.